part of our mission, part of our philosophy is really all about teacher well-being. So like our biggest investment is actually in teacher pay, raises, benefits, even retirement benefits. And part of that was whenever we hire new teachers, I promise them you're never ever going to have to give an unpaid makeup lesson ever again. And that's a big reason why people have come to work with me. However, when COVID hit, we didn't know what was going to happen. So at that point in time, we had a makeup policy where I basically told the teachers, like, all right, if somebody needs to reschedule, go ahead and give them makeup. I'll pay you twice.
You're listening to The Topcast, the original podcast for growth-minded instrumental music and voice teachers since 2015, with your host, Tim Topham. Our mission at Top Music is to empower instrumental music and voice teachers to find and nurture their innate creativity so that they can teach lessons that are innovative, integrated, and inspiring, and that will have a positive, lifelong impact on their students. Join us each week as we interview teachers and creators from around the world and unpack fun and exciting ideas to maximize your teaching and studio business success. Hey everybody, it's Tim here. Welcome back to the Topcast. Great to have your company today. This is the show where we explore the smartest, most creative and future-focused ways to run a thriving and fun music teaching business. And today we're talking about makeup lessons and how to never give them again and why to never give them again. Rather than feeling like you're taking advantage of parents or a bad teacher, we're going to unpack why a no makeup policy signals that a teacher is professional, consistent, and self-respecting. Now, this whole discussion came about when I watched today's guests on a YouTube video on this topic, and it was actually introduced to me by Samantha Coates, who gave a fantastic presentation here in Melbourne a few weeks back, and she shared this video, and I couldn't believe it. It's so brilliant that I'm going to play it in full after today's interview so that you can understand the background first and then listen to the actual original video that sparked this conversation. And Jonathan gives his full approval for that. So you're going to be wanting to share this video, I can guarantee you, with all your parents after you listen to today's show. It is just brilliant, and it is the only video that I've seen that really speaks to parents about why makeup policies and teachers being completely flexible to every whim and wish of parents is not a good thing for anybody. And that just hasn't really been said in the same way before. That's why I was so excited to get today's guest on the show to unpack this with us. Now, before I go on, I know some of you quite happily give makeup lessons, and of course, that is totally and absolutely fine. But if you do have a policy of not giving them and are having trouble actually holding to that policy, or if you perhaps would like to move towards a place where you don't have to have this assumption that you will give up makeup lessons when parents need to change lesson times or they go away on a ski trip or whatever it is, then I think this will be really important for you. So I'm not saying that giving makeup lessons is bad. It really just depends on how you run your studio. It also depends a lot on the number of students you have and the kind of relationships you have with them, etc., etc. So of course, everybody is different. And I'm not saying giving a makeup lessons is a bad approach, but if you are interested in how this can work and why it can be really important for both the business side and the teaching side and everything, then definitely tune in today, and hopefully it'll at least give you some options, give you some ideas, and may make you want to change your policy. Maybe you want to stick to where you are right now. Totally up to you. As always, this is completely your choice to make, but yeah, I can guarantee you it's going to make you think. My guest today, Jonathan Roberts, is the founder and director of the South Shore Piano School. He holds the Doctor of Musical Arts degree in piano performance from the University of Alabama, the Master of Music degree in piano performance from the Cleveland Institute of Music, and 2 bachelor's degrees from the University of New Hampshire, the Bachelor of Arts degree in piano performance, and a Bachelor of Music in music education. Prior to the South Shore Piano School, Jonathan was on faculty of the South Shore Conservatory from 2013 to 2018, serving as the piano department chair from 2016 to 2018. Jonathan, welcome to the show. It's great to see you.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. So look, just before we dive in, can you tell our listeners just a little bit about where you are and a bit about your studio?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just south of Boston. I run South Shore Piano School, my school in Quincy, Massachusetts. So about 30 minutes south of Boston. And we've grown quite a bit in what I think is a short amount of time. We started in September of 2019, just before COVID. course. And despite the challenge, it's grown quite a bit. We have roughly about 350 students right now, all piano lessons, pretty much all private lessons right now. And that's among 11 teachers, including myself. So I have 10 other piano teachers that I'm just absolutely thrilled to work with week in and week out. And yeah, that's my school here in New England.
Amazing. So have you got plans to expand to other instruments or anything like that? Or are you quite happy with where it's at right now?
I'm pretty happy with just piano. I get the question quite a bit, like, have you thought about doing other instruments? But I feel like, especially from a marketing perspective, it makes it so much easier to just try to be like the best in this one thing for our community. It makes it easier for SEO. It makes it easier for when people are searching for lessons, kind of popping off as sort of the ideal choice. So at least for right now, no plans to venture into other instruments, but we're thinking to venture into group classes, and that'll be our new thing possibly in the coming months.
And that aligns really well because it comes under the same kind of banner. I think it's great because we've been talking a lot this month on our other episodes about marketing more generally. So it's a good reminder that sometimes expanding to every different niche isn't always the best thing. So I'm really glad that you've decided, no, this is my thing, and I'm really comfortable there and doing really well. So congratulations on how you're going too. It's great.
Oh, thank you so much.
So I really wanted to chat with you after I watched your brilliant YouTube video. We're going to share this with everyone and tell everyone to watch it because it is so good. It's directed really at parents about why their teachers should not give makeup lessons when lessons are missed.
Yes.
So look, let's start with the big picture. What inspired you to make this video tackling this pretty controversial topic of makeup lessons?
Sure. Well, first, thank you so much for the kind words. I'm thrilled that people have found use for it all over the world, I guess. And yeah, just going back to the beginning, I mean, makeup lessons for me had always been a big struggle from even when I first started teaching as a college student. So in undergrad and grad school, poor college student, desperate for money. Of course, I was going to be as flexible as needed because I knew nothing about marketing. I didn't know where the next student would come from. So, but in retrospect, though, those were probably some of the most stressful years because I would drive to people's houses for lessons. So imagine the extra layer that adds on when you're being flexible, and then you have to figure out, routing and things like that. And then I worked for a couple of schools that also theoretically had a no makeup policy, but there wasn't really follow through or backup. The first was when I was in school, I was at a for-profit that claimed to have a no makeup policy, but then all of a sudden I would see students in a different place in my schedule. I'd be like, I thought we didn't do makeup policy. And then I thought we didn't do makeup lessons. And they'd say, oh no, that's a rescheduled lesson. That's not a makeup lesson. I'm like, it's the same thing. We're just changing the words. And then the last job that I had before starting South Shore Piano School was at a big nonprofit that also, claimed a no makeup policy. But then I found that most of the studios were just giving makeups, and there was this sort of unspoken culture there where the administration was really happy with you if you just kind of bent over backwards to keep people coming, to keep parents happy. And it was even to the point where some teachers that I knew who were sticking to the no makeup policy, the people at the desk would kind of throw them under the bus and be like, oh, sorry, so and so feels like they have to stick with the policy, and it made for just a really lousy culture. And that was part of the inspiration for starting South Shore Piano School, because part of our mission, part of our philosophy is really all about teacher well-being. So like our biggest investment is actually in teacher pay, raises, benefits, even retirement benefits. And part of that was whenever we hire new teachers, I promise them you're never ever going to have to give an unpaid makeup lesson ever again. And that's a big reason why people have come to work with me. However, when COVID hit, we didn't know what was going to happen. So at that point in time, we had a makeup policy where I basically told the teachers, like, all right, if somebody needs to reschedule, go ahead and give them makeup. I'll pay you twice. So I basically said, I'll pay you for the original slot. I'll pay you for the makeup slot, because it's kind of, trying to, we're in survival mode at that point. But then coming out of COVID, the school was getting bigger. We were approaching, about 170, 180 students. This wasn't going to be sustainable anymore to pay people twice when the makeup lessons. So it's like, okay, now it's time to actually have a real makeup policy. And I was thinking that, I really needed a way to explain this in a clear manner, in a way that I didn't have to have the conversation over and over again. And also that I wasn't putting the burden on my teachers to have this stressful experience of explaining it over and over again. And so I I did some research, and I'm still sort of in amazement. I guess this was 2021, I think, when the video was published, maybe 2022. I'm blanking at the moment. But I remember searching YouTube and thinking, for this being like such a hot topic in our field, and there being 8 billion people on the planet, not a single person had made a video just like
That really explains it. Yeah.
That really explains it. Yeah, in fact, if you look up makeup lessons, you'll find like lessons on how to apply eyeshadow. And
I know. I did that just the other day when I was trying to find your video again.
Yeah. Oh, so it felt like there was a big opportunity there, not only to serve our community, but also to give other teachers a tool, just to be like, hey, this person is explaining it in this clear terms. And around this time period, I become really passionate about video, just as a general means of communication. I mean, it's the closest thing I think we have to cloning ourselves, where you can explain something once, you can incorporate visuals, you can do whatever, and then you can blast that to hundreds, thousands of people for all eternity. So, so yeah, it's become incredibly useful for myself, for our teachers. So, because instead of having to re-explain this over and over again, they just send the page, they can watch the video, and it just checks so many of those boxes.
Yeah, I'm so glad you did that. And you've clearly gone to a lot of trouble. You've really thought through it, and you explain it really well. And I think this isn't a topic that you can just go, look, I mean, you can say to parents, look, I just don't do makeup lessons, and that's it. But it's so much better if you can explain it. But it's going to take time, and it's a pain to do it over and over. So recording a video is great. And I've been talking to a lot of teachers recently in giving a presentation about business. And one of the things that I do encourage them to consider is something I learned from my chiropractor and actually a dentist that I once went and saw, where they actually sat me down at one of the first sessions and got me to watch a video, which basically explained their policies and procedures and why they were doing it and their vision and mission and all that kind of stuff. And that's where you could put this kind of information, so you don't have to say it over and over. So, yeah. We can all thank you for putting that together, because it is really good. And we're going to dive into why.
I'm so humbled. Thank you.
Oh, no. It really is great. So why do you think this issue is so emotionally charged for both parents and teachers?
I mean, there's a lot to unpack, I think, for both sides. I mean, probably a little more on the teacher side than the parent side. But for the teacher, there's so many emotions. First, I think there's that fear factor where, when we try to implement a makeup policy, there's like dreading the conversation. There's, are the parents going to quit? Am I going to lose my income? Am I going to be able to pay my bills? And then, of course, we have our relationship with our students as well. And, I think many of us have this experience where when we lose a student, it feels like especially if it's over something like money, it feels like a bad breakup or something like that. So there's the worry about the risk of losing that. But then the other side of that is, if we cave and decide to have this, a flexible makeup policy, that sucks too, because then we feel undervalued. There's a little bit of loss of dignity and respect and things like that. So I think there are just so many emotions on the teacher side. And then for the parents, I mean, I feel like it's maybe a tiny bit simpler, but it's just like, I'm paying for this thing, I'm not getting this thing, I'm not happy about this. You know what? And so I think for parents, they may feel like when we say, sorry, it's part of my policy, we don't give makeups, even if we have, whether we have options or not, they may just feel like we're being unreasonable because we're in this culture of, you exchanging money for time or a service or whatever. But we can't blame them too much because they're not really seeing the bigger picture. I think if they could live a day in the life of, a piano teacher, they would see it more from our perspective. So we have to give them a little bit of credit for not quite understanding our view, which is part of why I made the video.
And I think it's easy to think that we're also we're the sole proprietor most often. We work from home. So, what does it matter? If they're not teaching, they can go and do the washing during that period or whatever. But that's not the point.
Exactly.
Can you share what kind of reactions you got from parents or other teachers after you released the video?
Yeah, absolutely. So from teachers, I think there's this moment of like, oh, finally, like somebody like released this is exactly what I want parents to see and hear that, we live through when it comes to makeup policies. When it came to sending the email out to our families and students, I'll never forget my my gut was in knots because, wondering what was going to happen. I remember as my fingers over the send button. And so it blasted out to, almost 200 students explaining, where we've been, what we used to do for makeups, that it's not sustainable anymore. Here's this video explaining why, and just being really transparent that this is a controversial thing in our field. And, I think as teachers, the more transparent we can be about, all this stuff in pretty direct language, the better. Of course, we had, a small minority of people who just said like, yeah, this isn't going to work. I was totally expecting that. But to my surprise, the overwhelming response from parents especially was very positive. Like I could have cried because I really wasn't expecting that reaction. Because at least a couple dozen people wrote like, well, this is great that you're taking care of your teachers. I totally agree. This makes us feel so much better about, taking lessons here. And so so that felt really good. It was really an unexpected, pleasant surprise when it came to launching our makeup policy.
Yeah, and I hope some of them went, I never thought of that, or I never thought of it that way, because that's what I think that's the way even I was when I was watching the video. I think that's the way I was thinking too. Look, I love this analogy you make. You say at one point in the video, you say, quote, you can also think of it like this. Imagine you went into work tomorrow and your boss came in at 3:00 and said, look, I don't have any work for you in the next hour, so I'm not going to pay you, but I'd like you to come in an hour early tomorrow when I have the work so that you can do that then. Can you explain how this analogy helps parents understand those hidden costs for teachers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it all comes down to empathy. That's become one of my favorite words because I think it's a concept that people get confused about. They kind of think empathy is the same thing as sympathy, but empathy is just really that ability to put yourself in another person's shoes and really try to feel what they feel and see things from their perspective. And so I think it's just so important, not only as teachers and marketers and business owners, but also as people. I think we just have such a more productive society if we could exercise that quality in all aspects of life. And so the reason I think this analogy was so helpful is it kind of forced parents to actually feel what this problem would be like if they had that on their side. Because most parents, especially, if they went to their job and the boss said like, "Oh, you're just sitting around, you don't have anything to do, so I'm just not going to pay you, for the next 45 minutes, but come in 45 minutes early tomorrow," like they would not keep that. They would not keep that job. So I think with that analogy,
it's unreasonable. It suddenly sounds unreasonable.
Exactly. So I think it kind of forces them to sort of feel that from their perspective with their own job to help them understand us better.
Many teachers struggle to explain this whole time for value and money kind of equation to parents. So how can teachers communicate the value of their time without sounding inflexible or money driven?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this is where I think just that empathetic viewpoint helps so much, which is why I made the video to help with that and take sort of that burden off. But when it comes to actually having the conversation, whenever you need to have it, I think it kind of helps to start by mirroring the other person's viewpoint first, just so parents know that we're not trying to be unreasonable. Almost like, they say when you're talking to a child, like mirror their feelings, say you understand what they're saying, but then tell them what they really need to hear. So so if somebody asks for an exception for our policy, I might say like, I totally understand, these things come up, you're wanting to reschedule, it's frustrating. But then kind of using that as a segue to be like, but here's our situation. We have, in my case, we have hundreds of students. This is our teachers' jobs, our livelihood. If anybody could reschedule anytime, I'm sure you could understand my life becomes a mess. It lowers the quality of the teaching and things like that. So I think just being really transparent about that, or even just going into past experiences, just saying like, I used to give makeups, anytime, and I was so stressed, I wasn't focused in my teaching. I wasn't getting enough sleep. So again, I think just to kind of sum that up, sort of again, mirroring the other person's feelings about it, using that as a segue to explain your perspective. And then if needed, just kind of digging deeper into any past experiences or more practical reasons that this just doesn't really work for everybody.
Yeah, I like that, talking about the past experience too. You kind of touched on it, but what are those hidden sort of costs for teachers of constantly offering and juggling makeup lessons?
Yeah. So, yeah. How long do we have?
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I don't know. I'm sort of kidding, but it's there. Yeah, there's so many. It's hard to pick the top few. But just from my own experiences back to when I used to be more flexible, and teachers that I know now who are still extremely flexible anytime somebody needs to miss something. But just to kind of the top few that come to mind. I mean, first physically, you're kind of all over the place when you don't have sort of your set work hours, and it feels like your time is just kind of open for anybody to commandeer, and just managing all of that, it can really result in sort of cognitive overload. Mentally, you just kind of it's just stressful just trying to keep up with the scheduling, the rescheduling. I know so many teachers that'll have a student ask for a rescheduled lesson, and then they'll forget to come to the rescheduled lesson, and they still expect to make up for that. It can easily snowball into just total chaos. And then, of course, as I think we touched on before, there's that sort of that sense of dignity that's lost when you feel like everything else in a family's life is more important than their time with you, and you're the one that's expected to be the flexible one. And so boundaries just kind of go out the window. I mean, I know teachers who have missed out on family time, self-care, other activities, just because they're constantly juggling. And then I think the worst part is if a student ends up sort of ultimately quitting anyway, especially when a big reason for that is their own stability in the schedule. It kind of leaves you feeling really lousy, because it's like, okay, I bent over backwards for them, and you still ended up quitting. So, so like, what the heck? So that's the short list. But yeah, I think that we could go on and on about that, but those are the top handful that come to mind.
Yeah, and I'm sure listeners will be nodding their head and going, yeah, I have felt like that. I think we've all felt like that at some point. And so the whole point of this episode and Jonathan's video is to flick this and switch it so you don't have to experience this, because honestly, you don't. And I think you talk about a mindset shift. Well, I think it's a mindset shift, because you actually say to parents in this video that a no makeup policy signals that a teacher is professional, consistent, and self-respecting. Now, this is a big claim and a big move, I think, because most of the time I think teachers, because we're trying to do the right thing, and sometimes we feel like, although we're running a business, we're also running a community service, we think the more strict we are, the worse person we are. Like, we're a bad person because we're holding to these policies. But you're actually saying this actually signals that the teacher that you're hiring for your child is professional, consistent, and self-respecting. So can you unpack how this mindset shift, because this is a big one for teachers to try and wrap their head around, how this kind of changes how students and parents perceive the teacher?
Yeah, absolutely. So just thinking off the top of my head, I think the biggest aspect of this is that families will begin to respect you as a professional and I don't want to say a legitimate activity, but an activity on par with their other things that there's no question about, whatever the equivalent of makeup policy would be. So like in sports, if you miss a practice, I mean, not only do you not get a makeup for that practice or some of your money back, but there are like penalties for that. If you don't show up to a practice, doesn't matter how busy you are, doesn't matter how much homework you have, doesn't matter if you schedule a dentist appointment, you miss that practice, you're not playing in the game or whatever. Doctor's appointments, those aren't rescheduled to your convenience. Most places you have to pay a fee, or you get rescheduled to an incredibly inconvenient time. And so what was interesting was when we launched this, and of course there were some families that still needed to be educated, but when we launched this new makeup policy of ours, we had families who were kind of notorious in the past for saying, we have a doctor's appointment this day, we can't make our lesson, or we have a dance thing, we can't do it. And then when the answer was no, here's our makeup policy, they wrote back and they said, okay, we'll be able to make it to the lesson. So you could make it to the lesson after all.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's a matter of priorities, isn't it? I think we're just seen as the easy ones to kick around, sadly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the one-to-one thing maybe, lends a lot to that. Just like you said, especially for teachers teaching out of their home, it's like, well, you're just at home anyway. So, surely you can just make an exception. And then, of course, there will always be families that this is just not going to work for them. And this is where I think about Seth Godin talks about this concept of a worldview that I really like. I think it's helped me a lot with this, makeup policy business. He calls a worldview this sort of set of narratives and stories and experiences that, everybody kind of walks around in their head with. That's sort of their filter on how they see the world. And so when it comes to this, there will inevitably be families where no matter how well you explain this, their worldview is just going to be like, nope, for music lessons, I come when I want, I pay when I want. And that's fine, but they can just go somewhere else. And so I think looking at it through that lens has sort of helped with those sorts of families. But yeah, I think with this sort of policy, we ultimately kind of bring ourselves up on par with the other things that families would never ever think to cancel or reschedule on the last minute.
Some teachers fear losing students if they tighten policies, or if they start holding to their policy. Perhaps they have it, but then they're a bit flexible anyway. So what advice do you have for teachers who are afraid that stricter boundaries will hurt their business?
Sure. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is to just dig really deep into marketing, which I think is something that everybody in our profession can keep getting better at and practicing just the same as we practice our instrument. Because I think most of the fear of this comes from like, okay, if the student leaves, how long is it going to be until I fill that slot? How am I finding students? I know my understanding is most independent teachers tend to rely on word of mouth for their incoming students, but there's not a whole lot of control over that. You can't, unless you run specific offers or something to try to compel students to tell their friends. Word of mouth sometimes just isn't enough. So I think digging deeper into the marketing so that that you have a steady pipeline of students coming in. And if the student leaves because you're implementing a makeup policy, there will be another person in the near future to come into that. And personally, I feel like a huge untapped easy win for a lot of teachers is working on just local search engine optimization, SEO. That was how I got my first start. When I first left my last job, I had a home studio for a year, learned local SEO, became number one search, for just my home studio. When I started South Shore Piano School, I did the same thing. So we ranked number one in our area as well as like surrounding towns and stuff like that. And so just that one thing, not even like other marketing things we've done, but just that one thing, search engine optimization, that's brought in new students every single week without exception for about the last 3 years. And that's including like holiday weeks and stuff like that. And I feel like if I can do it as like a developer techie person, I think anybody can do it. But I know so many teachers that worry about this, but they're still running like a free website on Wix or things like that. Not really investing in those things that'll get that sort of visibility. And so I think just putting some time into marketing, having that pipeline, even better yet, if you can have a wait list so that students are there kind of waiting for an opening in your studio. That's more of a practical thing. But then the other piece is just from an emotional standpoint, is to just accept that there, whether to have a makeup policy or not have a makeup policy, there's going to be some pain associated with either of those decisions. So having a flexible makeup policy that, like we talked about, that's going to cause all kinds of struggles physically, mentally, emotionally. Being firm on it means you're going to lose some people. Again, that's that sort of like, bad breakup thing that we talked about. But I think the difference between those two is that one of those paths is going to lead towards a healthier lifestyle, greater contentment, greater career satisfaction, ultimately a stronger, more stable studio. Whereas the flexible path is just going to be struggles with no end in sight.
So let's talk about how your studio actually does handle absences, because you don't just say, no makeups, no nothing, goodbye.
Right.
You give four great options. I think it's Zoom lessons, asynchronous lessons, a group class, and gifting a lesson or something. I can't remember exactly, but maybe could you just tell us about that model and how it works? What works best, what's been tricky, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So the four options, like you said, it's Zoom if a student just can't physically be in the space, or if they're sick but they're still functional. Asynchronous, if a student knows in advance they have to miss, they can send recordings in advance of the lesson. Then the teacher uses the lesson time to review that, send instructions back. We run a group makeup class the last Sunday of each month. So anybody who missed a lesson that month can just come to a group makeup class with me. Or the last option, if just nothing else works, they can just gift the lesson to a friend or a family member. And of those options, I would say Zoom, I think I don't want to say a gift that COVID gave us, but I think one of the positives to come out of COVID times was that online lessons became much more acceptable among more parents. Because I feel like prior to that point in time, online lessons were kind of seen as less than, or something we should not be charging as much for. I think with that being the only option for that stretch of, a year and a half or so, that made the Zoom option, much more acceptable as an option for people. So Yeah, that's been used a lot, and we have the setup to make it as immersive as we can, short of being an in-person lesson. And then the group makeup option, I would say, has probably been the most popular. And I think naturally there are some parents who have thought in the past, well, it's a group lesson, it's not the same as a one-on-one, it's not going to be as good. I'll usually just tell them try one and just to see how you like it.
Yeah.
And
Tell me if
usually
you
they're
still
so
think that
excited.
afterwards. Yeah.
Exactly, and they're thrilled. They're asking when they can come to the next one. So so because they get to see their kids doing things with other kids they don't necessarily get to. We usually do a mix of like group activities, and then they still get some individual instruction, but I still involve the other students in the group. And then we came up with this as a faculty. So one thing at South Shore Piano School that I think makes us really unique is we do pretty much everything together very democratically. So like we don't hire a new teacher unless everyone unanimously is like good with it, which has basically prevented us from ever having like a bad hire. It's the same thing with the policies. So we sat down, thought about it together, we brainstormed, thought like, okay, well, what can we offer so there's some option that's not just trading one-on-one time for money, like your sort of average makeup arrangement. And this is what we landed on is, giving families a variety of options to choose from. So it's not just, you don't get the lesson while at the same time guaranteeing our teachers' schedules and incomes.
How many people take the asynchronous option? Do you have any stats on that? Because I think I like this one because the parent and the child have to actually put some effort in to create something and send it to you. And I imagine a lot of them just don't. Would that be right?
They don't. I would say of the three, well, I would say the absolute least used one is probably the gifting the lesson. So that one, I think maybe like one or two people have used since.
It's a cool marketing idea if it did work though, right?
Exactly, yeah, because our main sort of core offer is a free trial lesson, but if they gift the lesson, it basically turns into a trial lesson that we have to pay for, so to speak. But yeah, of the other three, I would say the asynchronous is probably the least used. We have had some families do it, but I think you hit it right on there. It requires a certain amount of effort with videoing the stuff, sending it, and so on. So usually people are more apt to pick the live group makeup lesson or the live Zoom lesson.
Yeah, I think it's great though that you have those options, and I hope our listeners will be thinking, what could I offer? Because I know some are just no. If you can't make it live, we'll do an asynchronous lesson, and then maybe that doesn't really happen. But I think it's great that you have those options so we can think through those for ourselves.
Yeah, thanks.
How can teachers help parents understand that lesson time is a reserved time, not a refundable time? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think a lot of it, again, it comes down to that empathetic approach. And again, that's a big reason why I made this video, to kind of put it into the perspective for them that this isn't just kind of a hobby where we're just kind of sitting around and whoever comes in, we can teach whenever. So, but putting it in perspective to them that, and in a kind way, of course, I have degrees in this, I have certifications, this is my career, these are my working hours, this is a slot reserved for you or for your child, and for that reason, that's why we have these sort of policies in place. Again, I think having options definitely helps soften the blow. I think if you just say like, we don't do, no makeup policies. That's at least in my community where I have multiple studios that I need to keep filled so people can pay their rents and stuff like that. It's helpful to have options. In general, I've found, I hesitate to make a blanket statement, but just from other teachers that I've spoke with, I've found that the teachers who've had more success with just saying like no makeups whatsoever is usually more single teacher studios. Not only single teacher studios, but single teacher studios that have an interview process that I think kind of changes this isn't going to be the right term, but like the status roles or power differential or whatever you want to call it, where it's not just like, I'm just taking anybody who's available at 4:00 because I have the time free, but you need to meet like these conditions if I'm going to accept you into my studio. So it's more of they've been accepted to the studio rather than they're just claiming the open time slot, if that makes sense. So I think, framing it as best we can in a kind way, again, exercising that empathy where we understand where they're coming from, but we're like, this is a career. This isn't just like a side hobby while I'm doing my real job. And for that reason, that's why we have these policies.
Well, I want to wrap things up with our conversation with a bit of a broader question now. If every teacher adopted a no makeup policy like you recommend today or tomorrow, what would change in our profession?
I think the profession would just be elevated immensely. I think that the one reason why you might remember in the video, I include a section where I specifically say, I know there are other studios around here that are offering flexible makeup policies, but here's why, just kind of digging into that because I think it does create issues when in our in our local communities we're trying to have a makeup policy, but there's somebody up the street that says like can't come every week, come whenever you want, it'll be fine, and that kind of lowers the bar for everything. But I think if we if I could wave a magic wand and it's just the law of the land, there are no makeups anywhere. It would just be like, if you're going to, I mean, it's might be an apples and oranges comparison, but everybody knows if you go to speak with an attorney, you're probably going to pay a fee to have that conversation. There is no attorney that's just going to see you for free, or if they do see you for free, it's going to be like for 10 minutes before you have to like pay for it. It would just help that perception that we are professionals, we are trained, we are certified, we're passionate about this. And while it is something where we're serving the next generation of humanity, there is that element of community service. This is a career that is meant to be respected and such. And then I think it's almost like a flywheel that kind of builds on itself, because then when parents see that, they want to live up to that expectation. And so I would say to teachers listening to this, when people respect your makeup policies, they'll ultimately be the better students, because they also want to they want to meet you where you are professionally.
So what advice would you give to a teacher who wants to shift from flexible to firm? They get it, they know they need to, but they're dreading that potential backlash.
Yeah, absolutely. This is one I can relate to very well. And this is where I feel like as humans, we tend to catastrophize a little bit when it comes to this, when it comes to that sort of feeling of dread. And it used to happen to me quite a bit with makeup lessons and other life things as well. But I think especially if we're implementing this for the first time, coming from a flexible lesson policy, that part of our mind that fears the unknown says, well, I might lose all my students. I'm going to lose my income. I'll have to move back in with my parents. I'll have to go back to school and get a law degree.
So true. Yeah.
My marriage will end. So even if it's not in those sort of cohesive terms, I think to a degree that's where we tend to go, sort of like the worst case scenario. So I mean, the two pieces of advice I think I would give are, one, just accept that there's likely going to be some backlash, especially if you have some families that are very used to having this sort of flexible lesson policy, but also to welcome that as an opportunity to practice handling that. So just sort of welcoming it as a learning opportunity and accepting those emotional boundaries, so to speak. And then my other piece is, if that doesn't feel like enough, if it's still like an overwhelming amount of dread, a self-awareness tool that I found really helpful for dealing with this sort of feeling of dread when it comes to these things is journaling, or introspective writing, some people might call it. Specifically a prompt where I'll write like, okay, what's the absolute worst case thing that could happen? Like if absolutely everything goes wrong, like what does that look like? And actually write it down, on the computer, paper. It's not meant for anybody to read. You can tear it up, delete it, when it's all done. And then after you finish writing that, then write another prompt and think like, okay, if this were to actually happen in reality, what will I do about it? Or like, what will I do from there? And in all likelihood, most of those things are probably not going to happen. But I think by kind of taking those sort of like scary thoughts and like actually putting them down in written form and thinking that through, that can help ease a lot of that dread when it comes to hitting send on the email with your new updated lesson policies.
Great advice. Yeah. Well, look, let's finish with a final question. What do you wish parents understood most about the true value of their child's weekly lesson spot?
Absolutely. It's so hard to pick just one or two things, but I think the main thing is that, for us, kind of like we've talked about in other points on the show, is that, this is a career for us, and we're in the same category essentially as the teachers their kids go to, every day for school, except their kids have the benefit of not necessarily having to be in a class of 25, 30 people that we're trying to all get through a curriculum, but they get like undivided attention with somebody who's gone through degrees, some, graduate degrees, difficult degrees, has gone through certifications, things like that, in order to provide this, really high level of instruction. So that's one piece of it that for us, it's, a legitimate career field. but also that it's going to help fill in sort of an essential education gap that their kids have. Because I'm not sure if this is the way it is in your part of the world, but at least here in the States, music is a very tiny part of kids' curriculum. So they're losing out on all of those extra benefits that we're also aware of that come with music study, both when we're playing and when we're not playing. So also understanding that this is just a critical part of their education that they're getting from a really amazing teacher.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jonathan. What a great way to wrap things up. And thank you for putting the time and effort into creating that YouTube video that we can all share. And I know that you're really welcoming of teachers who would like to share it and use it as that can be helpful for them. So yeah, we really thank you very much for doing that. And we'll put a link to it. We'll share it as much as we can so that teachers know about it. Where can people go to find out more about your school?
Oh, you can visit me at southshorepianoschool.com. And I also do some work with the Royal Conservatory of Music Certificate Program, helping teachers get on board with that. So if any listeners have any interest in that, you can also do a Google search and find me there.
And I have to say, if teachers are looking for ideas about how to write a good website, what a good website should look like, yours is a real textbook example. I was on it just the other week. I think you really nail the above the fold, so the bit that students land on or parents land on. I think you really sell that because you talk about that enrichment of the life that comes from learning piano. Your heading is "Want to enrich your child's life with piano lessons." And then soon, a little bit later, ever feel like something's missing? That's brilliant. It's like, oh, yeah. And you've got these smiling faces, kids at pianos, and you've got a really clear call to action. Schedule a free lesson. It's very obvious what you want people to do. And I think that's probably why you've had success with the SEO side of things too, because this website is really clear. So well done on that. And people should go and look at that if they want a great example. Jonathan, it's been just great hanging out with you. Thank you so much for your time today and sharing all this great advice for our teachers and listeners.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope today's interview has made you think a little bit about how you do things. Perhaps you're already really on top of makeup lesson policies and you don't have an issue with it. Maybe you give them and that's fine with you. Maybe you're in the middle where you don't really want to do it, but you're not sure how to move there. Or maybe you have a policy that's very strict and clear, but you're having trouble upholding it. Whatever camp you're in, I would love to actually play Jonathan's YouTube video. It's less than 5 minutes, but it explains things so well. And if you'd like to watch it, then you can do so. We'll put the link to this. We'll actually embed it, I think, in our show notes page over at topmusic.co/episode 444. It is that good. It's a great one to share. And Jonathan has said he doesn't mind people editing this, chopping it up, using it for their site, putting it on their website, sharing it with parents. He's really open to having this be as helpful as possible for you and your teaching.
So you found a piano teacher with a flexible lesson policy. So that means if you're sick, there's a school play, a family member's visiting town, you got a birthday party, it's the annual dance recital, there's an unexpected soccer game, basketball game, hockey game, or you just don't feel like going to your lesson, then you can just make up the lesson on another day and time. Or if you can't find time for a makeup, then just cancel the lesson and not have to pay for it. What could possibly go wrong? Actually, a lot could go wrong. Makeup lessons tend to be a pretty controversial topic among teachers, students, and parents. And so in this video, you're going to learn exactly why makeup lessons aren't just bad for your teacher, but they're also not great for you, your kids, or anyone else hoping to succeed in piano lessons or any kind of music lessons. Let's start with an example of what actually happens when you miss a lesson and your teacher agrees to give you a makeup. Let's say your teacher teaches from 3 to 7, Monday through Friday, so about 20 hours per week. Now you have to miss your Wednesday lesson from 4 to 5 because of a soccer game, but you'd like to make it up. Now that means that this hour comes off of your teacher's schedule. But keep in mind that the teacher is still there at work during this time. And then your teacher needs to find time outside of their normal teaching schedule to give that makeup lesson. So in order to give this one makeup lesson, your teacher now has a 21-hour schedule, but it's only being paid for 20 hours of work. Or if you decide to just cancel the lesson altogether and your teacher doesn't require you to pay for the slot, then now your teacher's being paid for 19 hours for a 20-hour schedule. You can also think of it like this. Imagine you went into work tomorrow and the boss came in at 3 o'clock and said, I don't have any work for you for the next hour, so I'm not going to pay you, but I would like you to come in an hour early tomorrow so that you can do that work when I actually have it for you. Now, is that a job that you'd be happy with? Probably not, and it's the same thing for your piano teacher. Now you might be thinking, surely just one makeup lesson here or there isn't that big a deal, right? But remember, your teacher has dozens of students, so if everyone's allotted even one makeup, that comes out to an extra week of unpaid work. Or if the lessons are refunded, then it results in 1 week of no pay. And so if students can miss any time, especially during busy times of year like the holidays or the end of the year, a teacher who gives makeups, their schedule can end up absolutely insane. And this kind of schedule and all of its instability will make your teacher anxious, stressed, burned out, and ultimately result in a lower quality of teaching for you. Now, it seems that in recent years, a lot of studios and schools have been much more flexible with this, but I believe this is mostly out of fear. They're afraid that with a more strict makeup lesson policy, students will drop, and ultimately their business will suffer. But rest assured, if you can find a teacher who has a no makeup policy, that's great news for you, because you're getting a teacher who is professional, has job security, has a consistent schedule, has self-respect, and will be able to provide quality teaching consistently. Now you can easily find a studio or a school that will give you makeup lessons whenever you need it, or even allow you to take several weeks off at a time and still hold your slot. And while that gives you some scheduling flexibility, that means you're also with a teacher who has no job security, who's overworked, underpaid, burned out, which certainly results in a lower quality of teaching, and in fact, they may not even be your teacher for much longer. I know many teachers who have quit their jobs or even left the field just because of this problem. Now, don't get me wrong, we get it. Stuff comes up. Kids get sick, there's school functions, family events. You may need to miss from time to time. So that's why at South Shore Piano School, we offer 4 options in the event that you need to miss a lesson. If you're available but you just can't make it to your lesson, we can offer you a Zoom lesson. If you know in advance that you have to miss, you can send us your materials in advance and take an asynchronous lesson. This is where you'll record your pieces, send them to your teacher, and then your teacher will take the time during your normal lesson time to review those materials and return feedback. You can attend a once-a-month group makeup class, or if none of those options work, you can gift your lesson to a friend or family member. Whether you're a student, parent, or teacher, I hope this video has helped you understand the importance of makeup policies, not only for your teacher's security, but also to help provide you with the highest level of education possible. If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe, and happy practicing.
Well, now that you've listened to that, I'm sure you've understood now why I had to get Jonathan on the show to unpack this with us. And I really do hope this has been helpful for you. If you've got any questions about makeup lessons, then jump into our Facebook group. It's called Piano Teachers with Beginner and Intermediate Students. You can find us on Facebook. It's totally free. There's about 8,000 or so teachers in there. Happy to answer questions. This will be a great topic to have a chat about. Now, don't forget to download your Top Music magazine. It's over at topmusic.co/magazine. This month, of course, our focus is all about technique, as you know, and we've been so happy to share as much information as we can about technique, and it's packed into that magazine completely free. Come and join us, topmusic.co/magazine. Well, next week on the podcast, I have a very exciting show coming up. It's the announcement of our inaugural competition for composition. It's our composition competition winners announcement, and we're going to be replaying live the announcement that I'll be making about that to our members in the coming week. And I'm going to do a little bit of a wrap up to end the year, because that'll be our last show for the year next week. Thanks so much for joining me. I know many of you have listened to this show for years and years, and I'm so grateful and thank you for your company, and I hope we can see you this time next week. Enjoy. How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends and research into music education? How do you connect with other teachers around the world and make sure your teaching stays fresh and relevant for students of all ages and stages, both now and into the future? I created our Top Music Pro membership to be the one-stop shop for music teaching resources, training, support, and community, and I'd love for you to come and join us inside. With over 40 comprehensive training courses, hundreds of teaching demonstrations and lesson plans, free monthly sheet music, discounts, and all the business and pedagogy support you could ever need, Top Music Pro is the community you've been looking for. If you're ready to level up your learning from the podcast and join thousands of other teachers in our global network, head over to topmusicpro.com today. If you enjoy this show and want to hear more of our work, be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening today. For links and resources mentioned in this episode, visit us at topmusic.co/podcast or check out the show notes. I'm Tim Topham. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy your week ahead, and I'll catch you next time.